right, so is everybody ready to get started? Okay, so this is creating ADA compliant courses. There are several different ways that we can create those courses. So what I'm going to focus on is primarily the digital documents that we create when we're putting things in our course shells or making online courses. There are a few extra considerations. So first, a little bit about me. I'm a learning designer here at St. Leo University. I think most people here know me. I earned an MS in instructional media design from Full Sail University. I've been doing this for a while. I would say it's been about 11 years that I've been working on instructional design officially, and about 15 because I was using the principles and creating items as a classroom teacher in K-12. So I've been doing this for a little while. Today's agenda, there's a few poll questions. I'm just going to kind of ask you guys the questions, and then you can kind of use the chat, or we'll just worry about the quiz at the end. What is accessibility is what we're going to kind of cover. What kind of course materials? So this is going to be a basic overview of course materials that we use often. So if you're using MS Word documents to create worksheets or informational text for students to use in your courses, we often use those. We often use charts, images, tables. Even when you're using the publishers materials that you're going to use, you still have to check those oftentimes for accessibility in the way that you're using them. We'll go over some brief HTML rules when we talk about the charts and tables, but I would like to invite you all to take the HTML course offered next week. Colleen's going to go over a lot of the issues within HTML and some accessibility issues there as well. Converting things to PDF, PowerPoint presentations, how do you check for accessibility in those presentations, and what are some best practices in there? And also student created materials and presentations. I think oftentimes we forget when we're having students create things to present to their fellow classmates or that are going to become a part of the course that students are taking. We need to make sure that the students know how to make those materials accessible and that they know how to be able to present those in a way that all students can use the materials and benefit from them. Um, then there's going to be a little quiz or a test. We're going to do a fun little quizzes and question and answers. And there's some resources that you guys can use to make it easy. So I'm focusing on the things that we use most often and how to make those things accessible quickly and easily. So Section 508 of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that is what covers the digital communication accessibility features in your classes. So if you're posting these items onto a website, onto an online course, onto your course shell, any of those things, or making them available digitally, emailing them, sending them out, we have to make sure that they comply with Section 508 of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Many of you may be familiar with Section 504, which is the big kind of overarching one that we use in education a lot, in public accommodations. But this one basically focuses on accessibility of the digital items. So if you look at the image here, you've got, charts and graphs that you might see in courses all the time. Plain language, what are your instructions? So as we're moving classes online, that may have been taught on ground previously. We have to remember that our instructions, there's not a face-to-face person there sometimes, or it's not that communication that people are going to get from body language as easily. So when we write out our instructions, we need to be very clear, very precise, and use plain language. We have to remember that everybody has the right to communicate and everybody has the right to participate in their courses fully. So we don't want to leave anybody out. Um, we have to make sure that we're thinking about these things. And sometimes it's simply easy to forget to do that. I've been doing this for years, and a lot of times I'll have things and I'll be putting them in online classes. And I'm like, oops, I forgot to do this. Or, oh, I put a whole chart in there and I forgot to create a document that breaks down all of the information in the chart. It could seem like it's daunting and will take a long time to make things accessible, but I'm going to show you some tricks that make it work quickly. And the more that you practice with these items, the more that you use the features that are built into the common software programs we use all the time, like the Microsoft Office suites, all of those things, they will be easier to do and they'll become second nature and it won't take much time at all. So let's start with Word documents. what I will do is the images that I have in here, I will also send out the PowerPoint and the PDF and the images. So if you want to look at the images, I have a couple of little screen share videos that I did that show how to access some of these features if you're not familiar. And actually, if you are on your computers and want to kind of look at Word and PowerPoint while I'm going through this and see if you can make sure that you can easily locate the items in the accessibility checker, that could be helpful as well, because then when we do the question and answer, if you found something difficult to locate, we can address that at that time. So the first thing you want to think about when you're talking about Word documents are the heading, hierarchy, and structure. And even though I'm a learning designer, I just kind of learned a lot about this since I've been working at St. Leo. It's not something a lot of people focus on, but it is the law, and it's really easy to forget or not know how to do some of these things. So I don't want people to feel like, oh, I'm horrible, or I should be doing better, because we can all frankly get better with making sure that our courses are accessible. There are a lot of major companies out there who've actually been sued recently because their websites weren't accessible to people. And these are companies that are major companies. Some of them were entertainment industry companies. So these are people who work in this area all the time, but we're still finding, gaps. So what we want to kind of do is just make sure that we're thinking about our students, thinking about what might possibly be an impediment to them being able to access our materials and our courses, and then just do better and work hard to make sure that we're overcoming those obstacles. So the heading hierarchy, this is one of the things that is commonly not done correctly for screen readers. So for many of us, we've never experienced using a screen reader. I know myself, I have not. I've only used minimal ones, like Cast has them. If you take a UDL course, you'll learn more about the software and accessibility features that are free out there and that Cast has. If you're not using the tool, it's kind of hard sometimes to understand how it works. So there are some general rules. I'm going to give you a link out to Microsoft. They have a whole accessibility page that gives you information on even in more depth than what I'm going to go into today regarding how to use Microsoft Word and all of their suite of items to make things accessible. So when you're doing heading hierarchies, you want to use the ribbon at the top of the page. So if you're looking here, I've got the image and you can kind of see the ribbon up there. It's a little small, but can everybody kind of see that? We've
Yes.
got the ribbon here where, yeah, thank you. So when you go here and you have the kind of heading, you're looking for your font, you want to use that to create your hierarchy. When you just kind of change the font and type in what you want and then go back in and highlight it and change the font and the size and the all of that, it does not pick up from a screen reader perspective. So if you use the ribbon up here and then select your levels, like the first one is heading 1, you just highlight your text and just change it into that heading. It's going to be able to pick that heading up when a screen reader reads it. You also want to make sure that you don't skip over any parts of that hierarchy. So if you start with the heading 1, you don't just skip down to heading 3. I used to have an issue with that sometimes because you're looking at it and you want it aesthetically a certain way, but then you realize, okay, well, you've got to have heading 2 in there because it doesn't make sense to the screen reader. So it's confusing for a person using a screen reader to read that document if you don't have the headings in order. So I have to make sure that I do heading 1, heading 2. You don't have to have a bunch of subheadings, but you do need to make sure you don't skip in the hierarchy. So if you have 3 headings, you need to have a 1, a 2, and a 3. If you have a 1 and a 2, you don't have to have a third layer, but you do want to make sure you don't skip anything in that order. When you do that, you also go in and you can select normal for your text, or you can select listed text from the ribbon so that your text is also going to be in line with the screen reader. So it knows what order to read things in and it makes sense on the page. So you want to use the word heading tool, you want to use ordered lists, and you want to use the ribbon feature rather than the tab key to do that. Does anybody have any questions about that hierarchy?
Where on the ribbon is the ordered list?
Okay. The ordered list is going to be I'm going to send this picture out as well. I'll provide all of these to Melissa so she can post these. But if you look right here, it's where you know when you go in to do a bulleted list, and you select the bullet icon, and you can choose the what type of bullet you want, whether you want it to be numbered. That is going to be your ordered list. You also have a space on the other side over here if you're just doing text that you don't want necessarily bulleted, but you're going to just start listing text, that will say ordered list as well. So I will send out an image of this document as well because it's a little small on here, but I've labeled what's ordered list, what's bulleted, and that sort of thing, and you can see what the examples look like. So if you actually have Word that you can open and kind of look at it and see, you'll be able to see when you get that drop down. So is everybody familiar when I say like the bulleted?
Yes,
When
I
you go
have
in to put the
a
bulleted?
Word open. I just
Hmm.
I just
So if
didn't
you
see it.
select
So
a
thank you for.
yes, it's easy to miss them. And so that's why I've included images, and I have a couple of little videos that I will send out, and I'll send out the PDF and the PowerPoint as well. There is also a link that I'm going to include to the Microsoft accessibility page, and it will go into a lot of detail on exactly how to do even more than this. So if you want to go a little bit further, you can see more information there. And so these are common features we use. So you want to use the ribbon feature rather than the tab key. You don't want to use asterisks and necessarily like icons all the time just to create your bulleted list. You want to go ahead and use that order list feature, that button with the bulleted points on it. Next, you have images. When you use images, you want to make sure you use alt text. So alt text stands for alternative text. So when you use imagery, and we often put images in our presentations. Let's see if I can make this. Can I make you bigger? We will use that on our text. So you want to enter the alt text. Every picture should have alt text. So if you go here where it's accessibility tracking, if you go to review, in Word. And this is actually the same for all the Word products. PowerPoint, Word, you're going to have the accessibility tracker in there, pretty much in the same location on the ribbon. So if you go up to the accessibility tracker and select it, it will allow you to see anything wrong in your document. So it'll give you suggestions on what you need to fix, why you need to fix it, and it'll tell you how to fix it. And so the main thing here is that you want to describe this. So I deliberately used a poster because a lot of times we'll put something in a course or in a course document that we want students to use, and we want them to get information from it. It's not just a decorative picture. So if it were just a decorative picture, you would select the icon next to it and say decorative, and you wouldn't need the alt text. So a screen reader would skip over that, and it wouldn't be important. It wouldn't a student wouldn't have to focus on that if it's just a decorative piece of text. But if it's something that is giving information, then it needs to describe the image in detail. So this poster here, it's a 1940 US Census poster. So what you want to do for the alt text is explain all of the information in that poster. So this one is saying, help the 10-year roll call, take the census. You want to convey what's in that image to a person who cannot see that, who may be blind and using a screen reader. So you want to explain what it is. It's a 1940 US Census poster. Uncle Sam is asking for help with the 10-year roll call. If it's an item in a history class, for example, make sure to emphasize the elements you want students to examine the most. If you're wanting them to examine the Uncle Sam imagery or the 1940, the fact that it's the 1940 census and what's being asked, make sure you describe that specifically. What academic information are they to take from this? If it's an art class and you're wanting them to know that it's an image there, you want to describe the image in detail. What color is it? It's red, white, and blue. They're artistic elements. You want to go into that level of detail. If you look over here on the side, you'll notice that it only asks you for maybe one or two sentences of text for alt text. So that's when we would just put, 1940 US Census poster. But you have to remember that you can't stop there. What I usually do is I will create another Word document that just has all of the information for whatever the image is that I need students to take away from it. The basics that they would get from just looking at it. If there's to analyze it, I would give them the information they would see when looking at it. I wouldn't give them the analysis, so to speak. I would let them be able to have whatever image information a person would get from just looking at the image. You can see the color, you can see what's written on the image. So I would give that to them in a separate document that I would link to it or provide to students who needed that. I would link it in the course next to this actual item, like a transcript. So I would put, select for alternative text, or I would put a transcript in there so that they can pull that document up and get the same information all of the other students in the course have. Does anybody have any questions on that? Because I know I said a mouthful there. So,
Monique, are the accessibility checkers always under review in the Microsoft products? Is that where we find them?
yes. Yep. So you'll go to review and you'll see the accessibility checker. And when you select it, I know that in PowerPoint it's a little bit different because you can do more in it. So you can see, you can go to each feature you want to address separately, or you can just run the whole checker. In here, it'll just pop up in Word and it'll show you, okay, alt tag. It'll show you any errors you have. So it'll say alt tags missing, and you can drop down over on that side on the right hand sidebar. You can select the arrows and it'll show you which images are missing alt text or what's missing. So in there, I would probably, even in my alt text, if I was going to describe this poster, I would put the title of the poster and I would say something like see additional documentation or something like that, see transcript, something like that, so that they know that there is an additional document that they can get to that will give them for, for more details on the image. All right. Are there any other questions about kind of detailed image alt text? This would go the same for an infographic as well. So an infographic is going to be in between the poster and what we're going to cover next, which is charts and graphs. Okay. So charts and graphs in Word. So you have charts, tables, and graphs. You would have a separate document and transcript in plain text that is also an option for something like this. Because if you're looking at where you put the alt text, if you have it open up and it'll tell you, put one or two sentences here, you would type it into this corner here, and it would be attached to that text, to that graph. This here is a detailed graph with a pie chart. So what happens often is we'll label it, this is, something about the 1969, healthcare spending by source 1969. We would use that as our alt text. But does that convey all of the information in that chart or graph? So that alt text that we put in there tells you the title of the item, but would a student who is using a screen reader get the same information from that item as a sighted student or a student that is looking at the image? They would not. So we have to make sure that all of that information that is in that chart and in that graph is placed in alt text. So this is another situation where I would use an additional document. I would put the title in there and say, see additional document for more details. And I would break down, I've given a sample at the bottom here, and I'll make sure I have that image for you that you can see a little better. It'll say healthcare spending by source. Out of pocket 1969 was, and it gives the information that's in the chart, was $22,000, and in 2009 it was 299. So I would basically break out everything in the chart in plain language. Then I would go to the pie chart and I would say out of pocket healthcare spending represented in 1969 34% of all total healthcare spending from all categories represented. So there will be a document that could be read by a screen reader that would allow the student to have that information. When Colleen goes over the HTML, I know she's going to go over more of that, but if you're using HTML templates and an HTML page, when you use the accessible HTML template that has charts and graphs on it, it will read it for them. So when you're using an HTML page, you don't have to necessarily have the alt document there if you use an accessible chart or graph template, which we have. So I would love for most of you to go, or all of you to go to the HTML session, because that's going to have a lot of information as well. Infographics, they're going to be in between the poster and the chart. So if the infographic has data on it, you want to describe that data to the student, not just give them the title of it. Are there any questions about how to use alt text for charts and graphs in your Word documents? Okay, so hyperlinks also. When you're using hyperlinks in documents, if it's on a web page or if it's in a document, you want to make sure, or a presentation, that you use descriptive text. So you don't want to have a link that just says click here or select here. You want your hyperlink to basically tell them what they're selecting. So when the screen reader reads it, it'll say Microsoft Rules for Accessibility. And this is the document that I have linked to in here that will give you all of the extra details on accessibility for Microsoft products and how to create it. When they select this item, then it will go out to that page. But they know when they're reading through the page that this link is there. So for more information, select the following link, Microsoft Rules for Accessibility. They know it's a link, they'll select it, and they'll get the extra access that they need. When you save Word to PDF, generally speaking, once your Word document is accessible and you've added all of these accessibility features in, when you save it to PDF, all of those features will carry over to that PDF. PDFs are a little bit difficult because they're not as accessible as some other products, but generally if you're saving your Word document, all of the features are going to go over into that PDF. Okay, PowerPoint presentations. Now this one is a little bit different. So when you're doing your presentations, especially if you're going to post your presentations for students, or you're going to send your presentations out for other people to review later, you want to make sure that they're accessible. Again, there's an accessibility checker here, just like in the Word document. You select the accessibility checker, and then on the left or the right-hand side, you will see it open up to a kind of a menu, and it will tell you things that are wrong with your PowerPoint. You can also just go completely from page 1 all the way through. So when you select the accessibility checker, you can check reading order, you can check title, slide titles, and you can check all the features independently and individually. You can also leave the checker running in the background while you check them individually so it doesn't close, and you make sure that you catch all of your potential issues. So you want to use the accessibility checker feature. You want to make sure you have slide titles. This was a difficult one for me because whatever you title your slide, like for this right here, it generally titles that slide by whatever you put up there first. You may have duplicate slide titles, like there may be 2 slides that say course materials, PowerPoint presentations. You will need to go in and change your slide titles. And you will need to go into a different view, kind of like when you can see your notes view on the side, where you can see all of your slides on the left-hand side, and then you can select what your title of that slide is. You can also create invisible, I can't talk today, invisible titles. So you can go in and open up your slide. And what I'll do is I should have put a picture of that in there too. I will include a picture with the items of how to get there. And you go in and you type your slide title, kind of like in the master slide view, and then it's not visible to everybody looking at the slide, but it's visible to a screen reader, and it will read the correct title of the slide for a student so that they're not confused as they're going through the slide order, if that makes sense. So you want to make sure all your slides are titled and they have unique titles. If you check the reading order, is what you're going to see right over here. And that's important because in PowerPoint, you can add items in PowerPoint at different times. So let's say I came in with the title and I'm using a template for PowerPoint. And I start typing in, in my text box, all of this information. Then I decide to add a picture later, or I add the title in after the picture. When it reads it, it may start by explaining this picture first. It may go to the text box last, then it may go to the title first. You can easily change the reading order by looking at your reading order, and you just take the drop down, you move each item. It's going to list each item over here on the right. I know it's kind of small, but it'll list each item on the right, and you can drag it into the order you want. So if your title, you want that to read first, and it's on the bottom, you just select the arrows and move it up to the top and put everything in order. If you have an image that is not conveying information, it's just decorative, select a check mark for that to uncheck it, and it will label it as decorative, and it won't read it in the screen reader. So the student who's using a screen reader is not bombarded with excess information that they don't need. And so it's if it's decorative and it's just there because it makes the slide look better, a screen reader does not need to read that, so you would just mark that as decorative. Often when you're looking at the images in here also, it'll give you the option of use alt text, and it will give you suggested alt text. Use the alt text generator. I would recommend that you not use the alt text generator because the suggested text is often not high quality or detailed enough. So you want to write your own and make sure that you have enough information being conveyed there in the alt text that you choose. Does anybody have any questions about the reading order and why you would use the reading order? Okay. When you export to PDF, just as with Word, all the accessibility features that were edited should happen. So if you've changed things in reading order and you export to PDF, when you look at your PDF, it's going to have everything going in that order if you click through it that way. Also, when you're using PowerPoint and you search for templates, when you go to search for templates, put the word accessible in the search. It'll give you a bunch of templates and pages that are listed as accessible. So they've been checked for accessibility. You still want to run the accessibility checker because they may have some issues that weren't caught. And then as you use the template and type things in and move things around, things like reading order can change. So you always want to run the accessibility checker before you finalize your presentation. Okay, so are there any questions about what we've gone over so far or anything that you want me to cover that I have not covered? Okay.
We
Has
could,
anybody had a chance to? Okay.
oh, sure. I was just going to say, if
Yes.
you would like, for Professor Plummer or Professor Gould, if you all have a PowerPoint or a Word document that you want to try this out on, we do have the room set up so that you can share your screen too. So just, I do want to make that offer. If there's anything that you want to show or click around on with all of us here together, you're welcome to do so. Or anyone else.
Yes, I would greatly. Right. I think that's kind of the best way because once you go in and try something, sometimes things become a little clearer once you're trying to use them, and you may have questions that you don't think you have right now. Do I need to turn off my screen share so they can share, or will they be able to?
Oh, you'll get a little pop-up that says that they want to share. Regina, Renee, did either of you want to
Okay.
share anything? Or did you have a document you want to check while we're all
Okay.
together? Oh, okay, good, good. So we're so a question for you in the chat, Monique.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. What I can do is let me see if I can pull up Word and I can try to do it that way so you can kind of see um, what that looks like. Let's see. Let me pull up a document. Okay, I think this one. Let's see if I can share this screen. Come on, come on. Okay, I'm having trouble dragging this over. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me just pull you up. There we go. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. It looks like, yep.
Okay, so the accessibility checker in Word, let me make this a little bit bigger and let me close this out so you can see where it comes from. So if you want to do the accessibility checker, go to Review on the ribbon. Everybody see that? And then select Accessibility Checker, and it will open up on the right-hand side. So it's going to say what's missing alternative text here. So I have not labeled this. So it gives you recommended actions, add a description, mark as decorative. If I select mark as decorative, it's just going to skip over that part and it's going to skip over it in a screen reader. If I add the description, it's going to open this up and ask for 1 to 2 sentences. This is where I would describe the title of it, U.S. healthcare spending by source, chart, and graph. And then I would add text stating that see additional document for details. And that way they can go ahead and pull up the next Word document with all of the details in it. Can everybody see that? And I also have keep accessibility checker running while I work, so it's running in the background. And then here, if you select this, it will tell you more about making it accessible.
Also, Renee, if you're like me and when it comes time for you to use it and you can't remember where it was, if you just do accessibility at the top under the search, it'll pull that checker right up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
you might try that, Renee.
It will.
I think Renee, you commented that you still can't find it in yours. You might try that to see if it's somewhere else.
Yes, and you may have to customize your ribbon as well. So you may have to go into File and Options and make sure you have everything in your ribbon showing. It may be one of those items. So you can search for it, but you probably want to go in and just check your ribbon and make sure that the things you need are on your ribbon as well. But yes, that is a good point. Thank you for mentioning that. The search will bring up the accessibility checker. And I'm also going to share these files with you so that if you want like a little list of where they are, because I include the images and the pictures I kind of have circled where they are and things. So if you need to kind of refer to that as you practice, I had to kind of look at them for a while until I got used to using them like that.
And then while we're here in Word, Monique, would you mind showing us, we did have one question about the ordered list. So would you mind showing us that just here in Word?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you go home, let me close this out here and unselect this. Let's go up. So on the home ribbon, I have my bullets, I have paragraph, all of these options. So make sure that you have these enabled on your ribbon. So this is the ordered list here. So when you select this, this gives you the bullet. So if you want your decorative library, your bullet library, things like that, you want to use this in the toolbar so that accessibility readers can read it rather than using just, like the star key or some things and tabbing through and then selecting it yourself without using this ribbon. Because you can put them in with the tab key, but it's not going to be read by a screen reader. And here, right here is where you have your headings. So right here, I'm talking about images. So this is heading 2. Somehow I missed heading 1. Heading 1, this should be heading 1. So if I need to change this to heading 1, you go up to the ribbon and you change that. And now it's heading 1. Heading 2 should come here. I can't go from heading 1 to heading 3. Even if I think it looks better, for whatever reason, you cannot skip over your headings. So now I need to go in and I need to make this heading 2. And this is readable by a screen reader. Rather than me just typing it in and changing the font and the colors and things like that, you want to make sure that you have your headings there.
Thank you. I know I'll speak for myself here. I know I'm the worst about that. Like, well, this needs to be a different color and I'll just make this bigger and don't pay attention to the headings, and they're so important. And the same thing in D2L, correct? When we're making things in D2L, we should
Yes.
use the headings.
These rules apply in D2L. So I know Colleen will go over them when she does the HTML. We have different D2L templates that we've created. So it's going to make it a lot easier. They're accessible and they meet all of these features. So she's going to go over that in the HTML session. But when you use those, you've kind of got your accessibility built in and you follow the same rules with alt text, the same rules with headings. Mm-hmm. You sure do. And then also another thing I want to mention is contrast and color reliance. When you are creating images and items like in your presentations, on your web pages, in your Word documents, you want to make sure that there is contrast between text colors and background colors. So I will do an example here. The best example is black and white. The text is in complete stark contrast to the background. But if I were to take this text here and change it and make it yellow, that's going to be difficult for students to read on the page. Or if I were to turn the background color like a dark blue and then I have like yellow text, we want to be cognizant of the amount of contrast that we are giving between items so that they can read them easily. If you are embedding an image and you're putting text over the image, make sure you're sending the image to the background. You kind of make the image transparent or mute it a little bit so that the text can be easily read. So that is something that often happens when we're using color. I would also like to mention we want to keep the color blind in mind. Contrast and color should be on the opposite ends of the color spectrum, such as black and white. Um, One tip is to create a page or a website in grayscale. So different shades of gray. So people that are colorblind or may have difficulty with their screen resolution even, some of us, you know, that if we're using one computer, the screen resolution looks much better or our colors come through better. If you go to another computer, not as much. So we want to make sure that the information that we're providing isn't just based on color, but we want to do contrast, color. We want to represent the information and show it differently so that people can differentiate what we're saying and what we're doing. They're not just using color to emphasize, and we're not just using the text. So you want to kind of use multiple cues: color, image icons, shape, positioning, underlining, and annotations. So you'll notice that as well. If you go to the HTML site or HTML session, we've got icons on our pages now as well. They're like set icons that are going to kind of go with whatever it is that we're using. So that gives us multiple cues. Let's see. So using the accessibility checker, errors. When you're using it, the document, when you get an error, that means the document is very difficult for people with disabilities to access. So if you see an error, that is something that must be corrected. That means your document is not accessible. If you see a warning, it means it's a document is difficult for people with disabilities to access the information in that document. So you want to fix those as well. Tips are just that the document could be better for people with disabilities to access. You could go forward with something like that if the tip, whatever it is, would take you too long to fix or you're not sure how to do it. You kind of want to make them as accessible as possible, but a slight tip, you know, if it's going to cause a problem with you creating the item, then that's not something your document is required to have because it is accessible. Um, Let's see, let me make sure I covered everything. Does everybody understand the slide reading order? Because I think that that's something we don't use as well. I can go ahead and pull up PowerPoint if you would like, and that way I can kind of show you guys what a PowerPoint looks like before we take our quiz. Let's see, PowerPoint. I'll
I
pull up
think
the
that would be great.
accessibility PowerPoint, and then yeah, because a lot of it, just doing it and actually seeing it, it makes it a little bit easier to understand. Okay, let me pull this over. All right. Can everyone see my PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so if you go to review, you will see your accessibility checker here. So it's going to be in review, kind of like when you do your spelling and grammar. That's your accessibility checker is right here. When you select it, you'll see all of the areas. You can check accessibility of the whole document for everything, or if you just want to check one at a time, you want to check the alt text. I haven't added any into this document yet. How would you describe the object and its content? So this, image here would be decorative. So you would go ahead and decide what you want to call that. If you are wanting to check the reading order, which is what I focus most on when I'm in PowerPoint, you'll see here, picture one. It's got the check mark there. So it's saying that it's important and it's conveying information. If I uncheck that, it marks it as decorative. So now a screen reader is not going to bother with reading that. And the only thing that's going to be read on the page is the title. So if I go over here to the next slide, you'll see all of the reading order here. I've got the rectangle is decorative, picture is decorative, about me is the title. This little form here is decorative. The content placeholder, which is a picture, I can make that decorative, or I can label that a picture of me. And then this is text that will be read. So if I want the about me to go first, which I normally would want, I would select this arrow and move it to the top. But if you notice, the words disappeared in there because it's going to use just the accessibility. So now what it's going to do is it's just taking the words and not the item. So when you're inside of PowerPoint, you have to make sure that you have everything where it should be, and where it's going to read it. So if I leave this here, it's going to read this first because I've unchecked these items. But if I check the items back, I can now move this up, but will it read it? Because now the text is not there. So those are things that are little design issues that you would have to make sure that you are aware of. I know for me, when I do that, I put things inside shapes. I do all kinds of things to make sure that everything stays the way that it's supposed to be. So now when I move the title to this location, it's still the first item read. So if you look at the number, it'll be the first item. So all of these things are really decorative. So once I get rid of the decorative items, the reader and the page will focus on the information there. So it's text. Does that make sense? So when you are doing the reading order, you've got to make sure that you are not moving things around to the point where they're not going to get read or they're going to get lost behind things. That's why I say make your pictures, unless they're conveying information, all your pictures and extraneous decorations, just make them decorative. And that takes a lot of the problem away. And then you want to, I always save as I go along, because if something happens and you've got to go back and redo the whole thing. So let's try to look at, yep, this one, I think I did that. I did mark these decorative. So this is the course main materials. This is what's going to be read. All the extra stuff isn't going to be read. So does anybody have any questions about the accessibility checker in PowerPoint? And now I'm going to show you when you export it. Now this is going to, if you export to create a PDF document, it's going to tell you we have recommendations that will make the PDF easier for people with disabilities to read. It will prompt you to investigate the accessibility before you create the PDF. It will also give you more information about creating accessible PDFs here. So when you select investigate, it's going to take you right back to accessibility tracker, and you will see all of your errors that you have not corrected. Missing alternative text, tips, duplicate slide titles. So you're going to want to make sure that your slide titles are labeled correctly. It will tell you how to fix the slide titles. So it will give you a tip down here. Update the text to give the slide a unique description. intelligent services, suggested alternative text. This is the one that I would not suggest using. Like it'll say content placeholder. I would suggest using your own alternative text to be as descriptive as possible. Okay, so we do have a quiz.